All right, welcome back to another episode of Broken Dealer with my co-host Carmine Corino. I'm Daren Blonski with Sonoma Wealth Advisors, Fermata Advisors. That's our SEC registrant, and Sonoma Wealth's our DBA. For those who don't understand how the independent world works, that might actually be a good episode to talk about at some point. What's the registration?
I don't know, and I'm pretty sure you don't know either.
Well, does anybody really know with all the regulations getting cut right now? This is March 31st, 2025 when we're recording this. So all of us are like, wow, which federal government entity is getting gutted today and how will that impact us? Anyway, that's besides the point. What we're going to talk about today is all about being an advisor. What's your why, right? And starting with why and how important that is as an advisor to help you navigate the questions you might have about being an advisor and where you want to be in your career. So, for those who've read the book, I talk about a story in that book where when I had started with a broken dealer, I guess I can call him that, broken dealer. When I started off with the first organization I was with, I was prospecting a lot, right? Obviously, like all of us do when you first start in this business. And I referred to myself in an email to a potential prospect as a financial advisor, but I said, I'm a financial planner. And I got this nasty gram back from compliance. It said, you cannot refer to yourself as a financial planner because that insinuates a fiduciary obligation to the client. And I was like, what? I can't be a financial planner? What are you talking about? And well, back then things had kind of changed. And now since Reg BI came in and they were trying to make us all be fiduciaries, but that got gutted last September by the courts in Texas, that actually in truth, most financial advisors are not by law held to act in the best interest of the client. They have to honor a standard called suitability standard. That's suitability is synonymous with squishy. So anyway, I felt it really important. And what was your why? That if I couldn't be serving the client in their best interest at all times, then I really didn't belong there. It took me a little while to get out of there once I realized that, but that's the way it goes.
Why did you get into the industry to begin with, right at Jump Street, right? So what was your why when you went from what you used to do to the financial world?
So my first account, or my first investment account, was age 13. And I was at 13 years old. I forget how I had gotten some money. I think my grandpa gave me a savings bond or something like that. And I wanted to invest it. It was $3,000. And I went and invested it with a Merrill Lynch broker. And I'm like, yeah, I can say that. It was a client, Merrill Lynch. I was a client of Merrill Lynch. And
congratulations.
Congratulations. Exactly. And then when I graduated high school, guess what? I had $3,000 because it took me 5 years to make the commission back that he took on that A-share mutual fund that I had no idea that I was investing in. So,
wow.
And then that summer, what happened, my first job out of high school, I was a park aide for the California State Parks. And I worked in this little hut up at Sugarloaf State Ridge Park. And I got like 5 cars a day coming to the state park. And I would just sit there and I couldn't leave the hut. And I'd sit there all day long. And so I started reading a lot. I had listened to these investment stuff. And then I started reading about Buffett and who's Buffett. And I want to understand who Buffett is. And so I started reading a book called Buffettology, and started studying it. Anyway, I always just had a fascination with the markets and thought they were really interesting. And I thought the idea of how they worked was fascinating. It was a big puzzle. Long story short, I went into eventually go into leadership and team development through college. After college, became an IO psychologist, and enjoyed that. Did my master's in psych. IO psychology, for those who don't know, is looking at the psychology of organizations and how they function and run together versus people and how our brains work and interact together. But that was a lot of travel. Tons of travel. And that wasn't going to work for my family life and for raising kids because I was gone Monday, back Thursday, one day on the desk, and then you weekend and do it again. It's just not a good job. You're a hired gun. You go into organizations, you consult with them. And I had a couple stops along the way, but that was the general gist of it. And it finally got to a point like, well, what else would I do if I'm not going to do this in leadership and team development, which I loved doing, by the way. It was a cool job. It was just not a family job. I had heard about through the training world, this company called Edward Jones that kept winning a lot of awards. And so eventually decided to go talk with that company about becoming a financial advisor. So I paired my love of learning of the markets and my interest in people and human interaction. And that's why I became a financial advisor. And that's what I love today about it. I love helping people understand and think through things. And I love that process. But it also, when I was working in that environment, it also didn't express another part of me, which was that entrepreneur that we talked about in last episode, and really creating and building things that I really enjoyed. So it was being an independent advisor is real the coupling of those three things: my love for the markets, my love for the human interaction experience, understanding people, and then my love for entrepreneurism and being an entrepreneur and creating something and bringing it to life. It's a pretty cool thing.
Yeah, I found it. You read Simon Sinek's book, Start With Why or Find Your Why. You know, you ask why 3 times, you get to the 2 to 3 times, you get to the crux of it. And speaking to advisors from around the country like we do, it's finding out why are they in the industry. And there's almost like this bifurcation of one side versus not versus another, but just probably a 50% split of people that get into the industry for money. And they see it as a means to an end. Like I was talking to someone that works at a wirehouse. Says, well, I'm going to eventually go independent at some point, like you. Oh, great. You have any firms in mind? He said, the one that's going to write me the biggest check. That's their mindset of that's where they'll go because it's based on money. Where you probably have this as well, Daren. I have several advisors here were offered very big checks at other firms before they came here, and they still decided to come here because they have more of a passion for impact. Knowing that in an unconstrained environment like you and I have built, that their why is being able to help their clients with no agenda, no selling quotas, none of that nonsense, no constraints. It's not the Wild West, but hey, they're able to charge fees for financial planning or business consulting, whatever their why is to move that client impact needle. And I think that's where we find a majority of advisors that really gravitate toward the independent model, is that their why is more client impact driven than it is financial driven. I always say money shouldn't be the number one reason why you leave any environment, but it should be in the top 3, probably number 2, because we have responsibilities, right? We have families, we have, things we have to pay for. Money's a tool, but it shouldn't be number 1. And if money's number 1 reason why you're leaving, you should really kind of do some due diligence to make sure.
It's interesting, Carm, because I think when I was leaving the brokerage world, I went to all the other brokerages and entertained the offers, right? And they were large offers. And especially for a guy starting off in the middle class, I always say I'm a Best Western kid. And it was a lot of money. So it was very alluring. But what I realized through that process is that I was just trading problems or trade-offs for trade-offs, right? Like what I really wanted to express in myself and who I was as a person couldn't be fully expressed in the brokerage model. And, this company that I was leaving might have this thing, and then I go to this one, and it has this thing, and it's just trade-offs, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I wanted to truly be in an environment where at least I had control or some degree of control over those trade-offs. And that's why a big part of why I went independent. I also felt like it's disingenuous to take a huge check and then sit there across from the client and say, I did this for you and blah, 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 blah. And whatever you're going to tell them.
Mm-hmm.
And then be collecting this massive check on the back end. And at the same time, I get it. It also didn't feel right to me. And unfortunately, there's a lot in this industry, and no offense to those if you're listening to this, and that's you. You've just jumped from firm to firm to firm and taken checks your whole career. That's the way a lot of people do it. But it is problematic, I think. But I also realize at the end of the day, we all make sacrifices in life, right? And ideally we could all be perfectly and morally, ethically straight at all times in our lives, but we all make those choices at times where we go, wow, that didn't feel good. Why'd I do that? And, but that's what teaches us not to do that, right? Is to touch that burn, to go back to the other side. And,
yeah.
I think being independent allows for the most flexibility of that. and not having to make those ethical sacrifices that I think a lot of advisors have to make to stay okay. And you have to create some cognitive dissonance to do that over and over. And I just wasn't willing to do that.
Yeah, and that's the same thing in the insurance world is, I became an advisor because I was entertaining a career change, and a friend of mine recommended. I was always buying stock. I actually won a contest in high school, and they gave you a mock stock account. And it was our math finance class when I was a junior versus colleges in New Jersey. And we wound up coming in second out of hundreds of people. My dad helped me out with it a lot, but I got really into it. And I didn't become an advisor for the investment side. Like I'm a people over portfolio person. So it was really when I shadowed a stockbroker, when I decided to look at financial services as an alternative to what I was doing, which was working for the phone company, fixing phone lines in manholes and telephone poles. I shadowed a stockbroker one day. It was a friend of my dad's, or someone my dad knew. And I sat there and watched him. And not a good person, I didn't think, the way he spoke and talked to. He had some college interns there, and it's just very transactional on the phone, very detached from clients. Where then I shadowed a financial planner that worked out of his house. His first floor of his house, he had like a bi-level, I guess, where the clients walked in on the side. And it was a beautiful office. And I sat there for a day and saw 2 or 3 client meetings. And saw him talking on the phone and 0 transactions. It was all what's going on. I remember he was talking about college tuition for one of his clients' kids being paid from one of the accounts. And I said, man, this is much different. This is much more personal. There's more connection here. Everyone I walked in gave him a hug. And I'm like, whoa, this is much different than the stockbroker guy. Because back then he was a stockbroker, couldn't even get somebody on the phone. This environment, people were coming to his house, they were hugging him, giving him a kiss and thanking him for whatever. And I said, wow, this is the why, was that impact. And I knew nothing about compensation, fees versus commissions, licensing. I knew 0. All I knew is that's a relationship that if I were to work with people, that's what I wanted, that relationship. And got me to the insurance industry with this insurance company where they told me I was able to do that, but didn't tell me in this constrained environment that growing and conforming to their rules would be as hard as it was. And then ultimately, got the exit out into an environment where our only KPI we track is impact. So much different. There was a guy in the insurance industry, they call them study groups, right? So there was like me and like 5 or 6 other of my buddies.
Hold up. You said something I think is important to explore for a sec. You said the only KPI we track is impact. How are you tracking impact?
Advisors that we bolt on and households.
In households.
Yep.
So you're basically making a KPI assumption that the more households you serve, the more impact you're having.
That's right. So the more and we're not the more is better people either. We're not a volume shop, but every advisor that we take out of that constrained environment, that person is now a better husband, a better wife, a better advisor, because now they're not dealing with the nonsense that they had to deal with. So that person and their family get positively impacted. And if they service 100 households, every one of those 100 households now are better served. There's no agenda. We have more flexibility.
Well, let's be real. There is an agenda. The agenda is different, though. The agenda is how can we hit your goals? How can we help you? How can we support you? It's not how can we figure out how much money you have and what financial products we can place that fit within our commission schedule that get us the bonuses we want to go on the trips we're going to get.
That's right. With the shitty dinners.
That's right.
Yes.
Even good dinners as you're drinking the Kool-Aid from that business.
Yes. You can have your great dinner. Just make sure you wash it down with the Kool-Aid.
Yeah.
So, yes. So there is an agenda, but it's a client agenda, not a company agenda of selling a certain amount of their product in that year to keep your contract, to keep your payout and all that nonsense, right? And every advisor we extract out of those environments where now they're free to actually be the advisor they want. And again, we take the advisors that leave because of capabilities, conflicts of interest, not because my payout's 5 bips higher, 10, we don't, 5 for 10% higher payout. No, If that's the only reason why, through our onboarding, when we're just initially talking to an advisor, that's some of the things that they actually fill out, some things we discuss. We don't talk about money and payout and stuff till the end. It's all that culture and impact stuff first, which is most important to us.
There's a palpable difference when the locus of focus, that's kind of the locus of focus. The locus of focus is on the people, the impact, the culture. Because in a lot of corporations and big entities, they talk culture all day long, right? And like, this is our culture. And then everyone turns around and does the opposite.
That's right.
And, going back to our last episode, we talked about a quote in Extreme Ownership that I think is super important to that, right? And tell us the quote again, Carmine, so I don't mess it up.
It's not what you preach, it's what you tolerate.
It's what you tolerate, right? And then you go into organizations and they tolerate all kinds of garbage. And so in a way, like the first job of a leader inside an organization and running an independent organization is to be the person who doesn't tolerate the things that will lead that culture in that organization awry. So we know our why and we're passionate about our why. Why? Because that's going to drive through the mission, vision of the organization, the values of the organization. I'm a big fan personally of having a document, a one-page document that's a mission, vision, and then the values. And the values, when you create values, I don't like organizations that create values like our organization is honesty. And you're like, what does that even mean? Like, it's stupid. And I like organizations that create value sets that, like, self-serving here, like one of ours is pivot. That's one of our values, because I know entrepreneurially we got to pivot, right? And if things happen, we got to change and we got to move. Or another one of our values is build the ship, right? And this whole idea that no one created it, no one's coming to save you. You build the ship. You build the ship to the new world or whatever. And that's the mentality is super important. Sorry if I just threw shade on some of your values, Carm. I don't even know if you have. I haven't looked at your values, but
no.
If not, I'm going to take you through a values workshop and we're going to change those to make them real words that are meaningful to you.
For everyone listening, Daren and I speak, I don't know, a couple times a week minimum, right?
Yeah.
About anything and everything, personal, business, or just vetting and just brain dumping. But
usually it's just listening to Carmine talk about the workout he just did. He's like, yeah, I just burned 1,700 calories on my bike.
Yeah.
I just got out of bed because it's usually half day over by the time I wake up.
But every time I talk to Daren, because of all this psychology nonsense he was taught in college, I think he's examining my brain and he's taking notes and he's trying to figure me out. It's very weird. I feel like I'm on the couch every time I talk to him, but it's good. It's good. He keeps me in check. It's a good yin and yang exercise. But
well, real quick. So Carm, once I was on this flight and I was flying back, I think it was from San Diego. And I was talking to this dude. He's like, what do you do? And I go, I do this, da, da, da. And he's like, oh man, are you going to start analyzing the crap out of me now? And like telling me, and I'm like, no, it doesn't work that way, dude. I'm in IO psychology. It's how orgs work and that kind of thing. But yeah, your personality is pretty messed up. Go ahead.
Well, now I'm afraid to talk now because I think you're going to examine and analyze me. When something I learned at Strategic Coach within their 10X program.
So just for those who don't know, Strategic Coach is Dan Sullivan's deal. You can look it up online. It's a cool program for a new entrepreneur to learn like basic blocking and tackling for being an entrepreneur.
So his program in 2009 was my first business coach. From 2009 to 11, I did 3 years and re-engaged with them about a year and a half ago in their 10X program. And we talked about alignment in regards to leadership. So having alignment, like if I have, we have a bunch of staff people here that work 40 hours a week. They've agreed to give up 40 hours of their time for the most part to do this job, and I've agreed to pay them X, right? So there's some alignment there, right? We have some alignment where we're in agreement with at least that kind of base level of employment. But when there's true alignment is when their vision overlaps with our vision, vice versa. So that's when the team will come in early and not even mention it. That's when team members have done work on the weekends and don't mention it. It's because when they know the vision and the mission and we're all on the same page and they're on board and they see the impact and they get the thank you letters from the advisors and the baskets and the One advisor just brought in a bunch of birthday cakes for Ashley, whose birthday was last week, which was great because I hammered some cake after lunch and it was fantastic. When you have that true alignment, man, great things happen. And there's not a lot of organizations that do that. In fact, we're hiring someone from KPMG. She ran a big team at KPMG for, I think she was there 12 years. So big corporation, very big. We had her come and sit in our environment. I said, come and sit in our environment for a day before you make a decision. And she sat in our L10 meeting on a Monday, and we spent basically the rest of the day together. She walked out of that L10 meeting to my office. She said, I had no idea companies even operated like this before, where it's free to give opinions and give feedback. And I had read a good book, and I said, hey, to one of the team members, hey, Jess, order this book for everybody. This was fantastic. I want everyone to read this book and report back to me. What'd you get out of it? Because I might have missed something. Like, personal development for my team is just as important as personal development is for me. And this person being in that corporate environment was beside herself. She said, this is for sure where I need to be. This solidified it. And I'm saying, that's Monday here. Like, for me, it was no big deal. And I know you're this exact same way, Daren. I wouldn't run an organization any other way. I don't see why any leader wouldn't want an organization to run any other way, but it's foreign to some leaders, and it's really weird to me. But, impact for our clients, for our advisors, but what of our staff people? I give unlimited gym reimbursements, right? I want everyone to be as healthy as they possibly can, not because they'll make better employees, they'll be better humans. They'll be better wives, better husbands, better fathers.
Is that IRS approved to give gym reimbursements?
Listen, are you the police?
No.
All right, just let's move on, and let's not dwell on the small stuff here.
What does that even mean, Carmine?
I don't know. They have to go at least 100 times a year, so that's like twice a week on average for the year. So they have to show that they went 100 times a year, and we give it a reimbursement.
That's pretty cool.
And part of our L10s, once a month, we all declare personal goals in the beginning of the year, and once a month we do check-ins, hold each other accountable. And I think that really creates bonds between all the people here. And I did this last year too, where, I had my team all email me, hey, when was the moment you felt most proud to work for this organization? And the feedback was fantastic. Things I didn't even know. Let me give you an example. And this wasn't in this email. Our friend David Wood told me, he kind of got me on this path because he had told me a story. He did something very similar to one of his employees. We had an employee that took over an hour to commute to the office. And I wasn't really aware of this. And I would sit in the back of the room during one of their huddles. And this person is complaining about their ride and how they found an apartment in the town next door. Like, it'll be 6-minute commute. But, we just don't have her and her fiance, whatever, just don't have the deposit money or the problems. So I soak it in and I listen to the rest of the meeting. I leave and I go to my COO's office. I go, hey, tell so-and-so later that, we'll cover the deposit for her. Go ahead and move forward in the apartment. Because do you want to be there? Go, no, this is you. Just tell her. And as impactful as it was for her, it's not really that impact. It wasn't really a big move on our part, but we need to identify that the small things that we can do are a huge thing for other people. And again, David Wood reminded me of that one day. And I said, I got to keep my ears and eyes open for this. And months later, this happened. And we had the opportunity to make something happen for someone that changed their life. And now they're living there and are happy as heck.
I was doing some math a while back, and I think in our firm, there's 45 children who have parents that work for the firm.
Mm-hmm.
And you think about the impact that has on it and really what that means. And so what we do, the decisions we make, that stewardship we have over helping create environments so that those 45 children can be raised in a healthy environment or whatever. That's pretty cool when you take your mission differently. And so I think we're going to leave it there on this episode. And that's the why, right? What's your why? Why are you doing what you're doing? Be clear about it, know what it is, and run your why through the filter of whenever you're making a decision, does it connect with your why? Is it in alignment with your why and your values? Lots of nuggets in there. Carm, thanks for sharing. As always, thanks for listening to the Broken Dealer podcast, where we talk about how to go independent and what it's like to be independent and some of the challenges and things that we've learned along the way as being independent business owners in the financial planning space. Thanks a lot, everyone, and take care.
Talk soon.
Thank you for listening to Broken Dealer. Click the follow button to be notified when new episodes become available. Visit our website at www.brokendealer.com. The information covered and posted represents the views and opinions of the guest and does not necessarily represent the views or opinions of Carmine Corino and Daren Blonski. The content has been made available for informational and educational purposes only. The content is not intended to be a substitute for professional investing advice. Always seek the advice of your financial advisor or other qualified financial service provider with any questions you may have regarding your investment planning. Fermata Advisors, LLC, DBA Sonoma Wealth Advisors, LLC, and Cornerstone Planning Group are both independent registered investment advisors and are non-affiliated entities. The opinions expressed by Daren Blonski and Carmine Corino on the show are their own and do not reflect the opinions of Sonoma Wealth Advisors, LLC, and Cornerstone Planning Group. All statements and opinions expressed are based upon information considered reliable, although it should not be relied upon as such. Any statements or opinions are subject to change without notice. The information presented is for educational purposes only and is not intended to make an offer or solicitation for the sale or purchase of any specific securities, investments, or investment strategies. Investments involve risk and, unless otherwise stated, are not guaranteed. Information expressed does not take into account your specific situation or objectives and is not intended as recommendations appropriate for any individual. Listeners are encouraged to seek advice from a qualified tax, legal, or investment advisor to determine whether any information presented may be suitable for their specific situation. Past performance is not indicative of future performance.